Last year, America minted around 1,200 brand new millionaires every single day, weekends included. During that same window, the median American adult's net worth fell by roughly one-fifth. Both numbers come from the same report. Somewhere out there sits a scoreboard flashing the biggest numbers in recorded history, hanging over a stadium that keeps emptying out. Before asking if you're on pace, ask which clock is actually timing you. There are two clocks running your life, and you've only been shown one. Meet three people: a tired electrician, a hygienist who skipped a wedding, and a developer earning double the electrician's pay yet unsure where it went. One of them retires with the most, one with the least, and the order has almost nothing to do with what any of them earned. I'm Jordan, and I've spent way too much time studying net worth percentile tables. The way other people obsess over fantasy football rosters, that's me with wealth data. If you've ever read a headline about record wealth, glanced at your own account, and felt like you were reading a dispatch from a foreign country, stick around. Today we're working out what "on track" actually means in 2026, and whether that track leads anywhere near where you've been told it goes. Let's start by defining the term, because "on track" is doing a lot of quiet work in that phrase. A track implies a distance, a destination, and a clock. Here's what nobody explains: there are two clocks on the wall behind you, and you've only ever been handed one. The first clock is compounding. It runs on years, it works in your favor, and it's painfully slow at the start and almost supernatural at the end. That's the green line every finance channel loves to show you, climbing up and to the right. The second clock doesn't tick. It just quietly raises the price of whatever you're saving for the entire time you're saving for it: houses, tuition, child care, the exact number you need to finally stop working. Every year you spend chasing the finish line, something nudges that finish line further away. You don't win this race by running faster. You win it by making your first clock outrun your second one. Everything from here on is really just learning to read both clocks at once. Let's start with your actual finish line, because there's a good chance you've placed it in the wrong spot entirely. According to the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances, a household net worth of $1 million puts you at roughly the 82nd percentile in America. Genuinely good, but it doesn't put you in the top 10%, that threshold starts closer to $1,920,000. So congratulations, you're a millionaire, comfortably upper middle class, and still one entire additional million away from the top 10th of the country. Enjoy the plaque. It gets stranger the higher you climb. The top 5% starts near $3,780,000, and the top 1% sits around $13.5 million. Look at that spacing: from the 82nd to the 90th percentile is about $1 million, but from the 98th to the 99th percentile it's roughly $10 million. The ladder doesn't just get taller, the rungs spread further and further apart, until you're not climbing a ladder anymore. You're standing at the base of a wall with a helicopter parked on top of it. Here's the thing that distorts almost every conversation about wealth: mean household net worth in America sits just over $1 million, while median household net worth is closer to $192,900. The average is more than 5 times the middle. Using the average to describe American wealth is like averaging the temperature of an oven and a freezer to plan a picnic: technically accurate, and nobody's eating. If a hedge fund manager walks into a diner with 9 line cooks, the average person at that table is a millionaire, and nobody in the kitchen can make rent. So when someone tells you the average American household is worth $1 million, they've told you nothing about any real American, including you. Median describes an actual person. Mean describes a distribution. Headlines love the mean because it makes better headlines and worse decisions. Now, 3 people. Marcus is 41, an electrician earning about $62,300 a year. His van smells like copper wire and gas station coffee, with a radio on the dash that only picks up one station anymore. He isn't chasing riches. Marcus has a finite number of ladders left in his knees, and they've already told him the number. He'd like to stop climbing around 60 instead of 68. Renee is 26, a dental hygienist earning around $87,500. She spends her days looking into people's mouths and telling them things they already know and haven't done, which, honestly, isn't so different from what I do for a living. She isn't thinking about retirement. 26 doesn't make that word feel real yet. What she wants is to never again skip a friend's wedding the way she did last March, when a $400 flight ate her entire month's budget. Derek is also 41. He's a software developer earning about $132,000, more than double what Marcus makes. His garage holds a Peloton, a kayak that's touched water twice, and a truck with a payment close to the national average of $770 a month. What Derek wants is simple and a little sad. He'd like to actually feel the raises he keeps getting. Hold on to these three, because one of them is closer to your own life than you might like to admit, and you probably already suspect which one. But first, you need to see how you're actually being scored. Fidelity publishes the well-known savings ladder: 1 times your salary saved by 30, 3 times by 40, 6 times by 50, and 10 times by 67. T. Rowe Price puts the final number closer to 11 times. It's a reasonable framework, and both companies also happen to sell the funds you'd use to hit it. That doesn't make the advice wrong, just interested. Here's what you're actually being measured against in the real world. If you're under 35, the median household in your age bracket holds about $39,000 total. From 35 to 44, it's about $135,000. From 45 to 54, roughly $247,000. From 55 to 64, around $364,000. Find your bracket. That's the middle of the country, not the bottom. Retirement accounts tell an even uglier story. Vanguard's most recent report puts the average 401k balance around $168,000, with the median sitting closer to $44,000. There's that trick again, the average sitting nearly 4 times higher than the typical person. And even that number flatters reality, since Vanguard can only count people who actually have a Vanguard account. Roughly half of all private sector workers have no employer retirement plan available to them at all, at any given point. They're not losing this game, they were never issued a uniform. So if you're 47, earning $75,000, sitting on $87,000 in retirement savings, and the industry benchmark says you should have $450. 000, that isn't a shortfall. That's an entirely different sport. Now let's look at the other clock, and here the math stops being depressing and starts feeling almost unfair in your favor. Say Renee puts $600 a month into a broad index fund starting at 26, and never raises that amount again. Over 39 years, to age 65, at 7% annual growth after inflation, she ends up with about $1,460,000 in today's purchasing power. On her actual account statement, growing at 10% before inflation, it would read closer to $3,400,000. Sit with both numbers, because that's your two clocks in a single sentence. $3.4 million is what the screen says, $1.46 million is what it actually buys. Same money, the difference is the cost of living clock quietly eating 39 years of your lunch, one bite at a time. Now watch what waiting costs, because this is the number that matters most. Same Renee, same $600 a month, but she starts at 35 instead of 26. She ends up with about $732,000 in today's dollars. 9 years of waiting cost her roughly $730,000. Every single dollar she'd ever deposit across her entire working life only adds up to about $280,000. So those 9 years cost her more than 2.5 times everything she would have ever contributed. That's the single most expensive purchase in personal finance, and it never feels like a purchase at all. Nobody hands you a receipt for a delay that here's that same idea pointed straight at you. To land $2 million in today's purchasing power by age 65, starting at 22 takes about $610 a month. Starting at 30 takes about $1,110 a month. Starting at 40 takes about $2,470 a month. Starting at 50 takes about $6,310 a month. Same destination, same everything else, and the price multiplies by 10 across a single working lifetime. Every year you spend deciding, the meter keeps running. Which is exactly why Marcus isn't out of this fight. At 41, with $11,000 saved, he starts putting away $900 a month, which, on a $62,000 salary, isn't a spreadsheet decision, it's a series of small refusals repeated for 24 straight years. He ends up with about $728,000 in today's dollars, just under $1,200,000 on the actual statement, which, for a man who wanted to stop climbing ladders at 60, solves the ladder problem completely. Derek, earning double the income, puts in $300 a month and ends up around $437,000. Before you crown Derek the villain of this story, watch what actually happened to him, because it happens to nearly everyone who gets a raise. His income climbed about $30,000 over 6 years, great news. But the raise landed the same year his second child arrived, and child care in his area runs north of $13,000 a year per kid. The bigger house came with a mortgage payment $1,100 higher. The truck replaced a car that finally died. Every one of those was a reasonable decision made by a sensible adult, and by the time they'd all cleared, the raise had been spent before he ever felt it land. That's not a character flaw. That's arithmetic wearing a disguise. Here's your payoff, and it's exactly why I warned you the order would irritate you. With twice the paycheck, Derek finishes with only about 60% of what Marcus finishes with. Renee, who earns less than Derek and started with literally nothing, beats them both. Income turned out to be the worst predictor of the three. It usually is. Before we go further, you're owed the number that quietly rewrote every retirement plan in America. Morningstar's latest research puts the safe starting withdrawal rate at around 3.9% over a 30-year retirement. So $2 million throws off roughly $78,000 a year before taxes. And if that $2 million sits in a traditional 401k, you actually own something closer to 75 cents of every dollar on that screen. The IRS has been a silent partner in your account for decades and has never once shown up to a meeting. So $2 million isn't yacht money. It's a solid middle-class income with no boss attached to it, which is genuinely wonderful, just not the picture the word multimillionaire puts in your head. You deserve to know that before spending 30 years chasing the wrong image. Quick and necessary, I'm not a financial advisor, and none of this is financial advice. It's arithmetic, some Federal Reserve data, and a fairly strong opinion about how that arithmetic usually gets presented to you. Now, I want to be careful here, because there's a version of this video that leaves you feeling like a failure, and that version is both cruel and wrong. Here's what the data actually says about where millionaire wealth comes from. Ramsey Solutions surveyed 10,000 millionaires, 79% inherited nothing, 89% were the first generation in their family to reach that level, and the top 5 career fields were engineer, accountant, teacher, manager, and attorney. Doctor didn't even make the list. Roughly a third of them never earned $100,000 in a single year of their lives. Fair warning, that study is self-selected, self-reported, and published by a company that sells financial courses, so treat it as directional, not gospel. But it echoes Thomas Stanley's older research, which found most millionaires were first-generation wealth, had never paid more than about $400 for their best suit, and tended to stay in the same house for 20 years. And it echoes hard in the true story of Ronald Read. Read pumped gas in Brattleboro, Vermont, then swept floors at a JCPenney. He wore a flannel coat held together with safety pins and parked far from the meters to dodge the fee. When he died in 2014 at age 92, his family found 95 stock certificates in a safe deposit box worth roughly $8 million, Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, utilities, nothing exotic, nothing anyone would call a strategy. He'd bought those shares across 5 decades. Never sold a single one, and let the dividends buy more. He left $4.8 million to the local hospital. Nobody in town had any idea. Read never earned what Marcus earns. He never earned what you earn. He simply gave his first clock more time than almost anyone alive, and he never once let the second clock talk him out of it. You'll rarely hear about the Ronald Reeds of the world, because a man quietly not selling anything for 50 years doesn't trend. And if you're quietly counting on an inheritance, know the odds: only about a quarter of households ever receive one, and if you're in that quarter, the median amount is near $69,000. Not nothing, but not a dynasty, and not arriving in time to rescue your 30s. That much discussed, great wealth transfer, everyone writes about, the one worth nearly $124 trillion, is more than half funded by the wealthiest 2% of families. It isn't rain falling evenly on everyone, it's irrigation, and the pipes were laid long before you ever showed up. So the path is real, and it isn't gated behind a trust fund. Good. Now let's talk about why that second clock got so loud in the first place. Because pretending it didn't happen is how you end up blaming people for the weather. In the early 1980s, roughly 6 in 10 private sector workers had a pension as their only retirement plan. Today, that number is about 4%. That's not a policy tweak, that's the entire market risk of your old age being quietly moved off a corporate balance sheet and onto your kitchen table, with no ceremony and no vote. The question, are you on track, simply didn't exist for your grandfather, because someone else was keeping track for him. Then the prices took off. Since 1980, home prices are up around 550%, while incomes are up roughly 370%. Tuition has compounded at nearly 6% a year against general inflation of about 3%. Child care now averages over $13,000 a year nationally, which, with 2 kids, is basically a second rent payment that also happens to give you a cold every February. And here's the number that ends the argument: real median wages are up about 29% since 1979. Not per year, total, across 45 years. Over that same window, stocks compounded 8 to 9% a year after inflation. Put those numbers side by side, the assets you have to buy have been sprinting, while the wages you buy them with have been walking. It shows up in who owns what. Since 1989, every wealth group below the top 1% has lost ground, and the group that lost the most wasn't the bottom, it was the upper middle, the 50th through 90th percentile, falling from about 36% of national wealth down to 29%. Their wealth was tied up in houses, the top's wealth was in equities. Equities won. Underneath all of it, the Federal Reserve finds that 37% of American adults couldn't cover a $400 emergency with cash on hand. That's the floor of this entire pyramid. Compounding requires surplus, and no amount of discipline turns a negative number into a portfolio. So if you're 43 years old running these numbers and feeling like you missed a train nobody told you about, hear this clearly: you didn't fail the test. The test got redesigned in the middle of your career, and nobody sent you the memo. Marcus isn't behind because he's lazy, he's behind because the entire architecture of American retirement changed under his feet while he was up a ladder wiring somebody's kitchen. If that lands for you, and you'd rather work through this math alongside other people running the same numbers on their own lives, that's a conversation worth having in a community, not alone in a comment section. Now let's argue against the doom for a moment, because you deserve the strongest version of both sides. The optimistic case is genuinely strong, and not enough people say so. Average fund fees have fallen from about 87 basis points in 2004 to around 34 basis points today, one of the largest quiet transfers of wealth to ordinary investors in financial history, with no press conference to market. About 61% of retirement plans now enroll workers automatically, up from roughly 10% in 2006. And you can buy a fraction of a share of the entire world stock market from your phone, for free, in about 11 seconds. Ronald Reed needed a broker, a telephone, and 95 pieces of paper locked in a bank vault. You have better tools than a man who died worth $8 million. Now, congratulations, what's next? The pessimistic case is also strong. The Shiller price-to-earnings ratio is north of 40, the second highest reading in about 140 years, behind only 1999. Vanguard is forecasting just 4 to 5% nominal returns for U.S. stocks over the next decade, Research Affiliates is forecasting under 1% real for large cap stocks. Those are forecasts, not facts, and forecasts have been wrong in both directions before. But the honest truth about that familiar 7% figure is that it's a historical average, not a promise anyone actually made you, and then there's the gap that belongs entirely to you. Morningstar finds that investors earn roughly 1.2 to 2 percentage points a year less than the very funds they own, purely because of when they buy and when they panic sell. Other researchers argue the true cost is smaller, but either way, the direction is the same. The fund did just fine, the human operating it had feelings. So, are you actually on track? Here's the honest answer, and it isn't a number. 3 things determine it, and your salary isn't one of them: what percentage of your income you put in, how many years it gets to compound, and how much you leak along the way to fees, taxes, and panic. Rate, time, and friction, that's the whole machine. Everything else is decoration. Notice what's missing: your job title, your age compared to somebody else's chart, whether you started at 22 or 41. Renee didn't win because she was clever. She won because she was early. Marcus started at 41 and he's still going to be fine, not because he found a trick, but because he changed the one variable he actually controlled. And then refused to touch it for 24 years. So here's what I'd leave you with. Multimillionaire sounds like a destination. It isn't, it's a byproduct. Nobody who actually got there was chasing the word itself, they were buying one specific thing: the ability to say no. No to the extra shift, no to the boss, no to the client calling at 9 at night. $78,000 a year of nobody asking anything of you. That scoreboard from the very beginning, the one lighting up 1,200 times a day, was never measuring you. Yours reads differently. Yours reads, how many months could you stop working right now, today, before something breaks? For most people, that number is under 1. Getting it to 3 will change your life more than getting it to 2 million ever will. And unlike 2 million, you can start on it this month. So don't ask whether you're a millionaire yet. Ask which clock is winning, then go make it the other one.